Welcome everybody at home. This is the UGL Pros versus Joes Poker Invitational. My name is Rob Reforge Gonzalez, and I am joined here by one of my old friends from a different life, a different game. But we are here today to talk about some poker, and it is Mr. Eric Froelich. How are you doing, dude? How you been?
Well, I've been trapped in my house for the last 15 months. Other than that, things have been pretty good.
Yeah, no big deal. Just under quarantine this whole time. So, yeah, we've all been...
I haven't been trapped in my house the last 15 years by choice, but, you know.
Yeah, you know, this time it's you have to do it. So, but we can kind of see the end of the rainbow, I guess, on this side of it, and hopefully we'll be able to get back to normal. But, you know, when we talk about getting back to normal, poker is something for you that is very normal. And for everybody at home, if you don't know who Eric is, he's somebody who's not only played in the World Series of Poker multiple times, has bracelets, has over $1 million, you know, in tournament victories. Who knows how much money he's won in cash. So, Eric, tell everybody at home what it's like to be a professional poker player.
I guess the old cliche is it's a tough way to make an easy living is pretty apt on that one. Definitely high stress, definitely high volatility. It's one of those tough jobs where you go into the office, you work all day, you do perhaps the best you've ever done, played perfect, everything you could have possibly done right, and at the end of the day, you're down a bunch of money. And so that can be rough for a lot of people, not easy to handle. You know, it can happen day in, day out. The best players in the world lose a lot. It's just that's what variance is all about. You're going to win over time, but you know, you can go play 10, 20, 30 tournaments in a row and not even come close to making money. And very similar in cash games, it's a little bit harder to go on sustained losing streaks when you're a top player in the cash games, but there's a lot of tough games and there's a lot of tough runs. So it's definitely a thing that happens to everyone. And so you gotta be mentally strong to be able to deal with those swings, I guess, because they can be tough at times.
Yeah, I was going to say being mentally tough is probably the biggest thing that a professional poker player has. And today we don't really have too many professional poker players in our invitational. This is, like I said, our pros versus Joes. And what we mean is we've got esports professionals. We have former NFL players. We've got WWE alumni. So I wanted to tell you, everybody at home, who we have playing. So it is going to be kind of weird because everybody who's in this tournament are my friends. These are people I know personally. I invited them to play in this tournament because they're learning more about poker, some people more than others. So not only I'm playing in the tournament itself, we have a super popular Facebook streamer. Her name is Avery. She's a first-person shooter like extraordinaire. She has like almost 500,000 followers on Facebook, so she's doing it big there. She's also with XSET. And then her fellow XSET team member is Ambush King, who is on Black Lightning. He's an actor, he's a comedian, he's a songwriter, just does everything, and he's learning more about poker. We also have FaZe Clips, who is somebody who is obviously part of FaZe Clan, but also is another esports professional. And those are some of our Joes. And then we also have on our pros side, we have Brock Vereen. So if you know anything about the NFL, Brock was somebody who played for a long time. And then his brother, Shane, also is going to be at our tables. And he is somebody who also played in the NFL for a long time. And then we do have Mr. Drama King Matt, otherwise known as Aiden English, when he was a WWE superstar, and now he is over into the arena of esports. And I saved the Tannen Grace, who is a friend of both of ours, who is a professional Magic player, but also has kind of dabbled in pro poker. So, Eric, I know that you don't know what happens today. You haven't seen anything. But normally when you have a lot of amateurs, like, what are you looking for like skills to be better as a poker player?
It really is going to depend on a lot of things. In the short term, when it comes to poker, variance is going to be king. Like, if you get the best cards, or you know, if your cards just happen to catch up, it doesn't matter how bad your hand is. If you get it all in versus aces pre-flop, you're going to win some percentage of the time. And so luck in the short run is always the most important thing. Now, long term, we know that's not the case. Poker is a skill game. The best players do win over time, but you give them a small sample size, and absolutely anyone can win, and that's part of what makes poker so exciting. I think one of the things that really allows poker to be such a global phenomenon, to be such a big game, to be on ESPN and major networks, is that anyone can win. The Chris Moneymaker effect of just people coming to the tables in droves with just like, I can do this with, not necessarily the most knowledge in the world. And so just having a cursory understanding of the game and, having some semblance of hand strengths and, when to, kind of try to push your edges is huge, but it's not the end all be all in poker. And so that's kind of what makes all of these type of events very exciting.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's what is one of the most exciting things, that you can sit down and really not have a lot of experience and still do kind of well. I mean, if you get hot cards, it's going to work. And for this particular tournament, we do have 8 players, and it is going to be hosted on Ignition Casinos, their website, and they have an app. So, make sure that if you're at home and you want to get in on some poker, you can go ahead and download the Ignition Casino app, and you can play poker online like all of the players did in this particular tournament. But let me tell you a little bit about the rules. So every player is going to start with 1,000 in tournament chips, and last one standing is going to be the one that wins. But we do have a couple little caveats, because since everybody is pretty much an amateur when it comes to poker, if somebody gets knocked out in the first 30 minutes, they do have 2 rebuys. So they can go if they lose all their 1,000, they can cash in one of their rebuy tickets, and they can get right back in for 1,000 more, and they can do that twice, so long as it's in the first 30 minutes. And then every 5 minutes, the blinds do go up. So this is going to be a very fast tournament. It's only one table, so we're going to see who's going to come out on top. And they're not just playing for fun. The third place person is going to take home $200. The second place person is going to take home $300, and the winner is going to take home $1,000, all courtesy of Ignition Casino. So
it's too late for me to enter.
Is it too late for you to enter? You can't be in this one, and we know that 1,000 is just piddly change, for our World Series of Poker bracelet winner. But he's like, actually, no, it's not. He's like, I'll come get $1,000.
Anytime I can get 1,000, I take 1,000.
Well, we'll make sure to invite you next time when we have like 4 pros, and then we have 4 pro poker players and 4 people you guys have all maybe taught how to play. Maybe that's the next event. But for this one, it is going to be our former WWE superstar Matt, our Drama King Matt, otherwise known as Aiden English. And then like I said, we've got Shane and Brock Vereen. We've got Tan and Grace, myself, Avery, FaZe Clips. We also have, who did I miss there? Ambush King. So we have lots of people here who are going to try to get this money today. But we are going to go to a quick break. But before we go to our break, I want to let you know what's going to happen. I'm going to leave, and we're going to bring in our amateur poker player. His name is Chris Bisjack, and he's going to be jumping in the pool with Eric during play-by-play to kind of learn more about poker and help everybody at home maybe answer or get their questions answered, about what's a good hand, like what should he have done there, or why was this good, why was this bad, and that way you can not only get some high-level poker analysis from Eric, but also some of the amateur stuff that maybe you don't know. So don't go anywhere. We are going to come back with our tournament, and one person is going to walk away with $1,000 courtesy of Ignition Casino. So don't go anywhere. It all goes down right after the break.
What's going on, everybody? I am your host for the tournament here, Chris Bisjack, joined by Eric Froelich, the one and only. And we are live going into the UGL Poker Invitational Pros versus Joes, looking at Drama King Matt right now, and we are underway. Eric, it's nice to meet you. It's nice to work with you. What are you seeing right now on the table?
Well, not seeing much. It looks like he had pocket six in the big blind, so didn't even have to call any additional money. Just got to see a flop for free. And a hand like pocket sixes is really nice for any kind of amateur player because it's the type of hand where you generally know exactly where you're at. If you hit another six, you have gin, and that you now have a set, three of a kind, very tough hand to beat. And if you end up flopping a bunch of overcards like this board, a queen and an eight, both bigger than the six, with several other people in the hand, the odds of your sixes being good basically not going to happen. And so you can fold and get away for a very small investment.
Gotcha. So he's in a. So what you're saying, as you know, I am the amateur in this situation, trying to learn for all of our viewers out there. He's in an okay spot, but you mentioned gin. For all of our viewers out there, what is gin? Can you explain that to me?
I mean, gin is just the same term as just a generic Yahtzee jackpot, the type of thing that you might exclaim if you happen to hit, the best hand possible. And in general, a set, which is when you have a pair of the same card in your hand that also hits the board, three of a kind, those hands are extremely tough to beat. The only things they're really beating three of a kind are totally made hands, so a straight, a flush, a full house, or four of a kind, and just not a lot of hands that really beat that. And so that's what you're looking to do. If you have a hand like pocket sixes, you're looking to see a six come out on the board and have a hand that is rarely going to be beat, or you're looking for a flop like a 3-4-5 where you've got an overpair to the board in that if anyone else has a pair on the board, your sixes are best, or you have an open-ended straight draw because 3-4-5-6 means that you can either hit a 2 or a 7 to make a straight. So a board like this with a king, a queen, a couple of eights, with two other people in the pot, your sixes are rarely if ever good, and so a pretty solid fold there.
Yeah, so it looked like at that time, Drama King Matt had two pair on the table, if I'm not mistaken. He had two eights, and then he had two sixes. So in that situation, did he come out with the win there on that?
No, he ended up holding his hand. He was facing a bet, and then another player raised. And because you're beat by so many single cards, anyone with a king in their hand is winning. Anyone with a queen in their hand is winning. Anyone with an eight in their hand is winning. And that's just a single card. Or if they have a pocket pair, if they have two sevens, two nines, two tens, all of those hands are going to beat your sixes. And so with two other players in the pot, betting and raising, it's a hand that it's basically a mandatory fold at that point.
Gotcha. Makes total sense. So, and now it looks like we switched over to Face Clips, who's got a 2 and an ace, both diamonds. So, starting off here is Face Clips in a good situation.
Yeah, these are the type of hands that are really excellent for amateur players, and we call this a suited ace, in that you have an ace and any other card in your hand with the same suit. And what's nice about this is if you're able to flop three other diamonds, not only do you have a flush, but you have the nut flush, ace high being the highest. If you were able to come up with a flop that had two different diamonds, you now have the nut flush draw, which, because there's 13 of each suit in the deck, with two of them on the board, two of them in your hand, you're looking at 9 outs over the next two cards to have the best possible hand you can have. And so those are really strong hands. And then in spots where you completely miss the board, let's say that queen of diamonds that's out there right now is the queen of hearts, and it was the queen of hearts, 9 of clubs, 4 spades. Well, you're looking at a hand of ace deuce high with no real draws other than a backdoor straight draw. Backdoor is short term for you need two cards in a row to both come exactly what you need to actually make your hand. That would be relatively nothing. This is the type of hand where you're going to see a lot of professionals look to call on the flop because you have so many good cards on the turn. If you hit an ace, there's a good chance you have the best hand with a pair of aces, top pair. If you hit a diamond, you now have the nut flush draw, meaning you need one more diamond to have the best possible hand. Or you could hit a 3 or a 5 to give yourself a gut shot straight draw. And a gut shot means you need one specific card to make your straight, but only one.
Gotcha. Makes sense. So in this situation, we're seeing all the cards here. It doesn't look like he has anything too much except for aces high. At this point, I mean, you're so far into the hand here. Would you fold if you're Face Clips, or are you just kind of bluffing at this point?
Yeah, I think Face Clips made a really good bluff here in that the board was just a straight on board with the 9-10 jack queen, meaning either a king or an 8, just a single card in your hand, is a straight. This means that not very many hands can call. If, let's say you have a 9 in your hand or a 10 in your hand, you're losing to a jack, you're losing to a queen because they're both higher pairs, and now you're losing to a king or an 8, which make a straight. So even pretty strong hands going up to that river are now pretty poor on that river. And so he ended up making a bet, got the fold, and won the pot with, pretty mediocre holdings.
Yeah, I was going to say that it looked like he won the pot there. And, you can't really see poker faces in this situation. So explain to me how, in your experience in the World Series of Poker, how important is having a great poker face? Because some people say you don't really need one. Some people say you do. Does that really make a difference in the game?
That is tough to say, because having a great poker face doesn't necessarily mean much, but having a terrible poker face is catastrophic. I mean, if you are very clearly fidgeting, jumping for joy, extremely excited, that gives away a whole lot, versus a lot of other reactions can be hard to read what exactly they mean. So a good poker face versus a great poker face might not necessarily be the most telling, and you might give off some what they call reverse tells, and that people now think that you're weak, but you're actually strong because you're just kind of acting weird. But if you give away too much, that's a really, really bad situation, because you make it easy for your opponent.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could tell you from my experience in playing poker, I have an absolutely horrible poker face. So
that's the beauty of playing online.
Right. You can't really see anybody playing. So that's the benefit of it. But it looks like we've switched over to Reforged Gonzalez over here. He's got, pocket. He's got 2 6s. He's got a 6 of hearts, 6 of diamonds. Really in a solid spot so far. Would you agree he's in a solid spot, with no cards out, because he's got already a pair?
Yeah, starting with the pair is great, and this was the same as the first hand we saw of the night with pocket 6s, and that it's a pretty easy hand to not make a big mistake on, I guess, is the easiest way to explain it, because you should generally know where you're at. On a flop like 9 Jack King, all those cards are bigger than your 6s. There's a potential straight out there. There's a potential flush draw out there. There's a lot of bad things for your red 6s. But that means that Rob doesn't have to get heavily invested. So now he's put in his small raise, pre-flop. He's gotten a couple callers, and he doesn't have to go crazy. The most important thing for an experienced poker player, and this really goes to any poker player, but it's going to be easier to take advantage of when you're experienced, is position. And what that means is that if you look at where that little circle with the D on it, that's the dealer button. And that person is going to be last to act on every street. And so what that means is that everyone else has to make their decision of what they're doing on each street, the flop, the turn, and the river, before Rob does. And so that's just a lot of extra information. If they are betting and calling, like what we saw on this exact board, his 6s were, what you would consider to be a pretty easy fold, and he ended up calling, but there really aren't a lot of good turn cards for you, because even the 6 of spades is not a card that you love with 2 spades out there. So there's really nothing you're necessarily looking to see with your 6s. Now, Rob has decided to, now that he's gotten to the river, to make a big bluff on the spot, and it's not going to go well. He's gotten called. His hand isn't beating anything.
Right.
And we see that he actually got unlucky against at least one of the hands, the turn set of 5s. Yeah, so that's going to beat a pair of 6s, of course, and we don't know what the third player in the hand had, but we can imagine that it was definitely beating a pair of 6s if they're calling. But, Rob gets to rebuy. It's okay to take gambles in those spots where, when people check to you in that spot, again, that's the beauty of position that I was trying to describe, is that the odds are that they're pretty weak. If they had something, they're more likely to have bet it. So Rob's bluff is not necessarily a bad play. It's that it didn't work out in that spot, and it doesn't work out more often than not against more amateur players who are not making conventional lines. But when people are not betting on on that river and giving you the option to bet in position, odds are that they don't have the strongest hand, and that your shove all in is going to get some folds. And in this case, that was not the case at all, as he got called twice.
Yeah, and it looks like it really didn't pay off. I mean, it looked like FaZe Clips had 3 of a kind there, so obviously taking the pot home, and not anybody really challenging FaZe there. He has 2,800 chips right now, really just beating everybody. But as we saw, Rob bought back in, and now it looks like we're over at Tannen Grace. Now, have you ever played against Tannen, or do you play against him frequently, or what's your relationship to Tannen?
Tannen used to live in my house, and so I've known him quite well for a long time. We've been friends for many years, and he was my roommate when I was living out in Las Vegas, and we actually now his current wife, who was his girlfriend at the time, ended up moving out with us as well, and they got engaged, and it was very exciting. And we've now had several people who used to live in our guest room in Vegas who ended up engaged and married. So I kind of think it was a magic room.
I was going to say, if anybody needs to find love, they need to go to Eric's house in Vegas, and there you go. You're set, right?
Yeah, I've known Kenneth for quite a while, and met him through Magic, and of course an avid poker player, and just a really good guy.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear that you have such great relationships. So it looks like he has a 7 and a 4. Doesn't really have anything on the board. Yeah, he folded.
I don't know when he folded it, but it does not look like he's currently in this hand.
Yeah,
but
I was going to say.
A lot of action. We have a bet of 40 into a pot of 200 and an all-in for 900. And I assume that's Faye's calling, since the only person with 2,800 chips. So we're going to see a showdown.
It should be an interesting play here. It looks like...
Wow. That's a full house. 5's full of aces. Perfect board. And that's going to be the winner.
Yeah, wow. Now, with a full house, is that something you see more frequently, or are you typically seeing more of, pairs, 3 of a kind, straights, things like that, in terms of, like, odds and whatnot?
So, the hand rankings basically go to exactly the odds of those hands coming out, and that a pair, high card would be the easiest hand, which is no pair at all, and then 1 pair, and then 2 pair, and it's harder to make 3 of a kind than 2 pair. And then from there it goes straight, flush, full house, 4 of a kind, and then straight flush, or a royal flush, which should be a 10, Jack, Queen, King, Ace, all the same suit, which is the unbeatable hand.
Yes. And in your career, have you seen that at all? Is that obviously that's really hard to get, but have you really seen that in your career, through the World Series of Poker?
Seen it, yes. I've played, I don't even know, millions of hands, and I believe I've had 1. So it's not popping up too often.
No, definitely makes sense. The rarity of that happening, same suit and ace high, King, Queen, Jack 10, obviously hard to beat. But it looks like we're over here at the Ambush King.
It's one of those things that's hard to even, like, when you have all of that stuff, all of those good cards in your hand, it's much harder for other people to have good cards. And so that's why a lot of times you see, like, if someone has 4 of a kind, extremely rare to have. But when the board is like Jack, Jack, 7, 4 deuce, and you have 4 jacks, there really isn't a lot left out there for anyone else to have. There's already a pair of jacks on the board, and we know that no one else out there has a jack. And so those aren't the type of hands that you see actually coming up that often, because even when they do come up, which is extremely rare, you're not really going to go to showdown and because no one else is going to have anything.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If, like you said, 4 of a kind, there's only 4 of a certain card in the deck. So, it probably a very big rarity to see that as well.
Although speaking of which, here is top set of aces, an unbeatable hand right now. With 2 other players in the pot, this is the spot you dream of.
Yeah, and if I'm Drama King Matt here, I think that would this be a situation where you're betting pretty high, or because you have 3 of a kind, right? So what do you think?
Not a ton of reason to be betting big, because it's that same spot we were just talking about, 4 of a kind. It's very hard for anyone else to have anything. Like, the odds of anyone else having even a single ace when you have 3 of the 4 possible isn't very high. And so what are they really going to have? Like, you're hoping they have that ace. You're hoping they have an ace and a king, because that hand is never folding in this spot with top 2 pair. But you've got an unbeatable hand with your 3 aces going to the river. Now, gut shot straight draws that needed a 3, so a 2-4 is going to get there, and then the open-ended 4-7 got there as well. Those are not particularly good hands. We're not expecting anyone to have them, and so he should win this pot against pretty much anything he's going up against. But yeah, I would have tried to bet a little bit heavier on both the turn and river, just because the pot was so big, there was already over 1,000 chips in there, and you're betting 60. So you're basically giving people 20 to 1 to call, which is nice. You're going to get that call every time because what can you really fold getting 20 to 1? Just you're kind of calling everything at that point. But maybe try to get a little bit more on that river. But he does have the winner and gets 2 calls and has nearly doubled his starting stack now.
Yeah, and you're in a good spot if you're Drama King Matt here. I mean, you're right behind, FaZe Clips here, who's deciding whether to bet, and looks like he raised or bet 60 there. So, you're in a good spot if you're Drama King Matt. It's second place right now. The other players. Oh, no, I apologize. It looks like we had Avery, who's in first place right now with 2,000 chips. So, but he's still in a good spot, right? You still have money to play with. But right now, what are you thinking? Are you thinking he's really hoping for a 5 and a 7 to get that straight?
He only needs the 5 to get the straight because we only need 5 cards. But I'm thinking if I just picked up a bunch of chips, I'm probably not limping in with the Queen 6 offsuit first act. That hand is really not good. It doesn't play very well. And the problem with these type of hands is that what happens when the Queen comes out? The problem with that is that if anyone else has a Queen, the odds are that they're beating you because your kicker is so bad. And so it's just very hard to play where there aren't good boards for you. Like if you had a Queen and a 6 of the same suit, okay, well now if you have Queen 6 of spades and a bunch of spades come out there, you can feel pretty strong about your Queen high flush being good. That's a good spot to be in. But if a 6 comes out there or a Queen comes out there, you have no idea where you're at. You can't really bet strong. You can't really defend it, and you're out of position. So these are the type of hands that you really, really want to be folding pre-flop.
Yeah, I was gonna say if I was in Drama King Matt, it looks like he's trying to bluff right now, but I probably would have folded a little bit earlier on in this hand, but that's just me. And it looks like Dobby Air won the hand there, so Drama King Matt. Not really having a good poker face and losing it.
Well, he ended up showing the bluff of Ace Jack of clubs on a board where he had no pair and no flush draw. It just so happened that Ace Jack was also just the best hand.
Yeah, and it's a game of. Would you say this is more of a game of chance, or is there really a lot of skill? Being an amateur, I like to play those chance games where like roulette and things like that. But is there a lot more skill when it comes to these games over the other typical gambling games?
Yeah, in the end, poker is absolutely a game of skill. The best players will for sure win long term. It's just been proven over decades and decades and decades and millions of hands. It's just absolutely true. Now, in the short run, luck rules all. Like if we saw an all-in right here with these aces, we can say with 100% certainty that the aces are going to be the best hand, but we have no idea if they're going to win by the time 5 cards come out there, as any 2 cards can beat them when you get an all-in pre-flop. You can get all-in with a deuce 7 offsuit, the worst hand in poker, and still get there. Like a deuce 7 right now would only need a deuce or a 7 and they're beating the aces. So anything can happen in the short run, but when you're playing all of your cards optimally, you're going to win long term.
Yeah, more of a long-term play instead of just betting high and trying to get people to fold really quickly. So totally makes sense.
If you look at the situations we've already seen so far, and we look at some of the chips that may have gotten given away last hand by limping with that Queen 6 off. Now, was a ton of chips lost? No, you lost 60 chips or so out of 1,000 chip stack. Not the end of the world, not the end of the day. You can recover from that. And if you look at the previous hand with top set of aces, he extracted only 60 chips in a spot where he probably could have gotten more value by betting a little bit bigger. He got 2 callers, so the odds are that he would have been called with a bigger bet as well. So he didn't get maximum value there. And those are spots where that does not make or break you. However, there's only so many times where you can give up that 100 chips, that 200 chips before it really starts to add up. And at the end of the day, if you're going to fade those bad beats late, if you're going to get all in with the best hand and you need it to hold, well, when you do get unlucky, if you're able to accumulate those 100 chips here, 200 chips there, you're not out. And so those are the things that really matter and why the best players win long term. It's not because they're guaranteed to win in every sample size, because everyone gets unlucky. They get unlucky the same percentage of the time. But those people who are able to maximize the amount they won on their big hands, minimize the amount they lost on their bad hands, and now leave themselves in the best position to have the most chips at the end when it matters, well, that gives you higher odds of winning when, you know, the blinds get really big, where people are going to start gambling, and you're going to have to either get lucky or avoid getting unlucky. That's what chips does for you.
Yeah, makes sense. And you know, as we just saw, you know, FaZe Clips winning with those pocket aces. That's good to see. You know, it's a good hand to go in with, and you know, he came in out of top. So FaZe Clips is really excited right now, being on the top of the game here with 3,000 chips. So, but now you're seeing he has a 3 of diamonds and you know, a jack of diamonds. What's going through your head here, Eric? What do you think?
Well, if there had been another limp, and limp just means calling the big blind, it's a hand that he could have just called with, but I think in all instances here with a jack 3 diamonds, you just want to fold. Your hand really doesn't play particularly well. You have no, like, you want to have connecting cards when you have suited cards. Those are called suited connectors. So let's say a jack 10 of diamonds is a really strong hand. And the reason for that is because there's lots of different combinations of flops that are very strong for you. If a 9 and 8 come out there, you're open-ended, where you either need a queen or a 7 if you have the jack 10 of diamonds. If 2 diamonds come out there, you've got a strong flush draw. If a 9 and a 7 come out there, well, now you've got 2 overcards to that board and a potential straight draw if an 8 hits. Like, you want to have the most possible flop combinations to make your hand strong. And the problem with a jack and a 3 is they're so disconnected that they just don't work well together. You're basically looking for a decent flush draw by having some diamonds come out there, or to hit multiple 3s or multiple jacks, or a jack and a 3. And the odds of any of those things happening are low enough that it's not the type of hand you want to be playing.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And with this situation, you know, he has a 3, there's a 4, a 6. Could he get a 5 and a 7 and have it be a flush? Or I'm sorry, not a flush, a straight in that situation? Would that, like, would you question that if you were in his shoes when you saw the flop come out?
Yeah, I mean, that's something he could do, but it would be a prohibitive mistake in that to hit 2 specific cards that you need for a straight, keep in mind there's 4 of each of them in the deck. And so you're basically looking at, you know, 3 cards out there and 2 in your hand. So 47 cards left of the 52 card deck, only 8 of them even leave you live. So you need to hit an 8 out of 47. And then on the next card, you still have to hit what is only 4 outs left. So 4 out of 46, which is worse than 1 in 11, which is less than 10%.
So the odds of that happening are slim to none.
Right. So you're basically looking at a 16% chance to have a 10% chance. And that's just not where you want to be. That's not where you want to be investing your money. And so those are the type of spots that you really just want to avoid.
When you have to have a percentage in a percentage, that's not very good.
And keep in mind, hitting those 2 cards doesn't even necessarily mean you win. Like, there can be bigger straights out there. There's already 2 spades out there. So if one of those is a spade, maybe your opponent now has a spade flush. There's all sorts of bad things that happen and very small % chance of good things happening. So yeah, those are the hands you want to get away from.
Yeah. So in this situation here, I mean, there's 2 kings on the board. There's a queen in FaZe Clip's hand. He really doesn't have anything but a pair, and that would come off the cards in the middle. So should he have folded in this situation, or would you have kept those cards? Because like you said earlier, the queen and the 9 are pretty close together, but we haven't really seen, you know, anything in terms of the flop in those river cards.
Right. Yeah, queen 9 off is a super marginal hand. They are what are called gappers, in that there's a gap between the cards. They're not actually connectors, but there are flops that kind of connect a little bit better for queen and a 9. That said, it's a pretty mediocre hand. It's, again, a similar situation where you're really looking to play pairs, good suited connectors, which are, you know, something like an 8-9 suited, which the thing that's so nice about a hand like 8-9 suited is that you're never just going to be wrong about where you're at. The hardest thing about poker is that it's a game of incomplete information. And so you need to have a general gauge of what your hand strength is versus your opponent's hand strength, but you don't know their cards. Now, if you have a hand like 8-9 of diamonds, well, right now, you know, you have a flush. On that flop, you would have had a flush draw with the king 7-3 with 2 diamonds. And so you have a general sense of where you're going to be at the hand, and that if I hit a flush, my hand is good. If I don't, my hand is bad. and you're not going to really be deceived that your 8 and 9 are beating anything with 9 high. Like, you really need to actually hit something on the board to make something happen, so to speak. And so what's tough about hands that are like queen 6 and queen 9 is that your queen is not a good queen. And so what ends up happening is if someone else has a queen in their hand, odds are that they have a better kicker than you, which means you're losing, but also that you're not going to fold your hand because you have top pair, and they're not going to fold their hand because they have top pair, and you're losing. So those are the spots you want to avoid because they're extra tricky, and there's just not a lot of value to be made.
Yeah. So essentially picking your battles, what is the best bet in that situation? And you need to pick your battles a little bit better in those kind of situations. So
one of the really important things to know about poker as you try to move up the ranks is that there are some hands that play themselves. If I have aces and you have kings, we're both going to get all our money in because we have the 2 best hands in poker, and odds are my aces are going to win, but that's also not relevant. Whatever ends up happening happens. The kings are going to win 20% of the time, the aces are going to win 80% of the time, but those hands play themselves, and no one did anything wrong by getting it all in. Where poker has all of its money really made and lost is in making your opponent make more mistakes than you do. And that is when they're giving away chips in spots where they shouldn't be, so they're in a tough spot of not knowing whether to call or fold. That's really what the position you want to put your opponent in, is where they don't have good choices. Like nothing sounds great. Like when you have aces, it all sounds great. I just want to get it all in. This hand's great. It's the best hand in poker. That's an easy one. But when you have a queen and a 6 and you make a pair, well, you don't know where you're at against really any hand. And so that is just creating difficult decisions for yourself where, you just don't have the information to really make smart plays.
Yeah, very big mental game as you know, I am the amateur and I'm coming to learn. So it's great learning all this information, and for our viewers out there, it's great for them too, as they try to grow up in the ranks and whatnot. So it looks like we've switched over to Ambush King here, who is sitting out in this round as he only has 67 chips left. But let me remind you, you can buy back in if you lose all your chips here. You have about 2 minutes and almost 45 seconds left to buy back in, because within the first 30 minutes you can buy back in if you lose all your chips, but after that you're not in a good spot. So but he had an ace and an 8, and rightfully so, probably sitting out there. What do you think?
I think that this is probably a lack of familiarity with playing online poker, and that if you don't act in enough time, the software is going to automatically sit you out. And sitting out is, not a position you want to be in, because it doesn't let you make choices anymore. And so you always want to be sitting in so you can decide the best thing to do. Obviously, he only has 17 chips behind, so he 100% wants to call with any hand. I would call with a deuce and a napkin at this point for 17 chips, because look at the pot. The pot is 250 chips right now. It could get higher than that too. And you're putting in 17 to win 250. Well, there's no hand that's not good enough to do that. It just doesn't exist. And so, in that spot, you have to put your money in. You're getting such an unbelievable price on your 17 chips left. So that's not even a choice anymore. You just got to put it in. You don't even look. Like in live poker, you don't even look. You just put your money in.
Yeah. So when you don't have a lot of chips left, the chance of you being able to gain that pot with the minimal amount that you have is a risk worth taking, because essentially what you're saying, if I'm understanding correctly, is if you lose it all, you lose it all, but you can gain more by putting less in. Is that correct in assuming?
Well, like I said, the pot size was 250. He had 17 left, which is almost 15 to 1. And we know that there is no hand in poker that is a 15 to 1 underdog pre-flop against any other hand in poker. So if your opponent turns over, their 2 aces, and I guess if he had an ace and 8 at that point, it's close. You could consider folding. But when your opponents have unknown cards, you just have to get it in with anything. And when you already have that many chips invested. He already had 50 chips in there. So it's not like right now where he has 17 chips left and he's got a few different hands to choose from until the blinds get back to him. So right now he's got the dealer button, which gives him the best position. It means that he's the last to act and has the most hands left until he is the big blind. So right now he does not have to put his money in until that 150 gets all the way around the table back to him. So he has his choice of the next 4 hands to which one he wants to play. Now, he doesn't get to see what the next 4 are going to be before making that decision, but right now, if you had a deuce and a napkin, you can totally fold, because you're getting 17 and you're putting in 17, but you can only win what you put in. So you can only win 17 times 5, so you could win 85 chips. And I guess that was also true of the previous hand because he only had 50 invested, so he could only win 3 times his total, which was 67 at the time, which is just over 200 chips. So it was 15 or 17 to win 200, which is, about 12 to 1, which is still great odds.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we're just going to be waiting for Ambush King to see what he ends up doing here. I did not see it have him sitting out, but he has a king of diamonds and a 10 of diamonds. Was really he doesn't really have too much of a hand here, right? He was really hoping for a 9 and a queen, but he didn't really have much to go off of, huh?
Yeah, that's kind of what we say with the blinds get big and there aren't a lot of chips to play with, is that, in these type of situations, you really do have to just get lucky, but you put yourself in the best position you can to get lucky. And that is both by accumulating as many chips as you can earlier, not giving up as many chips as possible in the spots where it doesn't work out earlier, and then just choosing the best hand possible now. And so there's not a ton that you can necessarily control with all of that once we get to this point, but you put yourself in the best spot you can.
Yeah. And we're past the point of no return here. After half an hour into the game, no one can buy back in. So if you're Ambush King, what's going through your mind? Are you hanging on by a thread, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, pretty much. Once you get this short, there's not a lot of options. The only time where that changes is because we're paying out the top 3 players in this tournament. Let's say we got down to a spot where there was 4 players left and you had 17 chips. Well, now you're kind of put all the other players in a weird position where they're not going to want to play their hands and risk going out when you have no chips left. They want to make sure they're guaranteed to get at least that 3rd place money. And so they'll wait for you to go out. But right now we still have 7 players left and we're still 4 people outside the money. So your 17 chips, you're going to have to get really lucky with over and over and over and over again.
Well, it looks like this round he's all in with his whole 17 chips with a 10 of clubs and a king of clubs. So good cards to have starting off, but he can't really do much now that he's put all of his chips in, and everybody else on the table is looking pretty good with the amount of chips that they have.
Right, yeah, this is definitely a hand that he wants to go in with. He's got a great flop for his hand, too. And he actually had, the best possible situation happen. When there are 2 people who just call the big blind, you go all in, and then the person behind you raises. That's great because you can't knock anyone else out of the pot. You don't care how many people are in anymore because their money is already in there. And so you want everyone else to be out of the hand, so you only have to beat one other opponent. And so right now he's got a hand with 2 overcards to the board. He's got that king high flush draw. This is a great flop. So now he needs a king or a club, and that's the only way to stay alive, but did not happen.
It was close. And I saw your buddy Tannen go all in there. So, it looks like Ambush King is now out of the game, and we're switching over to Drama King Matt here in a pretty good spot. And like we said last round, he's got a king of clubs and a 10 of diamonds, the exact same cards that Ambush King had. So if you're Drama King Matt, you got enough chips, you're in a good spot. And we have, let's see, number 7 has 13 chips left. So
yeah, a lot to work with.
We'll see if he can hold on for dear life. But going all in on this as well, it looks like we don't know if they're going to be able to survive as well, especially with the king and the 10 in his hand. But as of right now, if I'm not mistaken, it's just ace high and a pair of 4s, right?
Right, but of course, if your opponent has an ace or a four, you're basically drawing dead with your hand. You would need two running cards of two diamonds or a queen and a jack, or two kings or two tens. If they have an ace or a four, even hitting a running two pair with a king and a 10 would not beat either of those hands, because aces and fours are going to beat kings and tens. So it's a pretty tough spot. It's definitely one where you want to strongly consider folding. Now he's got a pair of tens, so he's not up against an ace or a four. This is a strong holding, but we'll see.
The anticipation is killing me, and I'm sure it's killing our viewers here, because this is a good hand for Drama King Matt, and we'll see what happens here when they flip their cards over, because the other player could have a solid set of cards.
You can't handle it.
Yeah, this is generally a spot where you just want to check behind. It's going to be pretty hard to get a call from a hand that you're beating, in that you've got two tens with two fours and an ace. So you're playing the board besides your 10. So that means with any other 10, your opponent is calling, and you both will chop the pot because you have the same hand. And any other ace or four that they might be having, they're going to call those hands and beat you. So it's very hard to get value out of that hand. So it's a very thin value bet on the river, but ends up working out fine.
Yeah, and it looks like Drama King Matt got the win there with his cards. It was a good situation for him to be in, and now it looks like we're switching over to Reforge with a 5 and a 4. Those, in my opinion, are just not good cards to start with. I mean, it's great that you have two right next to each other, but what do you think? Am I wrong in thinking that having a 5 and a 4 are not the best to start with because they're right in the middle there?
Yeah, they're among the worst. It's one of those hands that you need to hit such a strong board to have anything, and that if you hit one pair with a 5 or a 4, you're very rarely good. And so you really need to basically be making a 5-card hand, which is, a straight. You don't have a flush draw. Your two pairs are going to be strong, but they're easy to counterfeit. And in poker, there's this thing called counterfeiting, where let's say the flop comes Jack 5-4, and you've got 5-4. That's great. You have two pair, really strong hand. Say the turn is whatever, any card above a 5. The problem with this is that let's say your opponent just had pocket 7s. Well, they've got one pair to your two pair. It looks like they're in big trouble. But if the board pairs again, so let's say it's Jack 5-4, or 8, and then another 8 comes, their 8s and 7s are going to beat your 8s and 5s, which is called counterfeiting, because now your 4 no longer plays as a pair, and because you can only play 5 cards in your hand, it's a very vulnerable hand. And so the amount of cards that you need to come out that are going to improve your 5-4 is just so many that it's not a hand you should really ever be playing.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, the amount of knowledge I'm learning, I would never have thought of counterfeiting and gambling being in the same realm here. But if I were to go say counterfeiting in a casino, I'd probably get kicked out. But that's good to know that I wouldn't be in a bad spot. So. Looks like Reforge has folded his hand with a 10 and a 2. Obviously not a good hand to start with. And now we're switching over to Phase Clips. Has an ace and a queen. So he has a pair, an ace high. So it will be interesting to see here what some of the other players have. It looks like there's 5 other players in, but a couple of them have already folded, and we just got one more to fold. So it's Phase Clips versus Drama King Matt.
And this is about as good as it gets. Top pair, top kicker, which means you have the highest pair on the board in queens. You have the highest possible kicker with the ace. And this is kind of the situation I was referring to earlier when we talked about a hand like Queen 6, is that a board like Queen 10-4 looks great for Queen 6. But when your opponent has a hand like Ace Queen or King Queen or Queen Jack, your Queen 6 stinks. Like right now on this board, Queen 6 would be drawing dead against Ace Queen, because even if a 6 comes, Queens and 10s with an ace is going to beat Queens and 10s with that 6. So those are the type of hands where it's just like, even when you hit as strong as possible, you hit the top pair with your Queen 6, it's still just not a very good hand, which is why we don't play it.
Ooh, and it looks like we have 3 of a... Oh, no, that would be a full house, right? Full house coming in with the win, but hey, we don't know. Drama King Matt could have. I don't think he's going to have anything that could beat the full house here, but you got to be excited.
Would beat that full house, and if we see 4 10s over a full house, that would be pretty impressive.
As we said earlier, a rarity to see 4 of a kind, but yes, if your phase you raise like he just did, and it's going to be a bold strategy if Drama King Matt matches that here. So this is going to be interesting to see, but I don't think Drama King Matt's going to win this. But he's going all in.
All in on it. Call the bluff.
Well, they have the same hand.
Whoa.
So pretty brutal river. He needed to hit the 1 queen left in the deck or any of the 2 10s left to get a split. So that's the issue with Queen 8, the same as Queen 6, the exact same hand in that spot, is that against the Ace Queen, he had 3 outs to chop, 0 outs to win, and he hit his 3-outer. So that kept him in the tournament, but those are risky hands to play because they're just you get beat by a lot of hands.
Yeah. The chances of you being able to have the same, the same cards as your opponent is very rare. So I am very shocked right now that they split that up there. But yeah, still with clips here, and he's got just a pair of queens. It's a good spot to be in, but now we're switching over to Reforge, and he's got a king and a 9. Is that, in your opinion, Eric, is a king and a 9? Is that too far apart, or is that still a good spot to be in?
Yeah, king 9 is a decent hand, and that's mostly because it's suited. Whereas if multiple hearts come out on the board, you've got the second nut flush draw. If one of those hearts is the ace, you have the nut flush draw, which is a pretty strong holding to have. It's not the best hand, but when you have position and so you're going to act after other players, it's the type of hand where you can see a flop and make a decision. Second pair, strong enough to be able to get all in with, was up against 2 different players with a queen, and you don't have 5 outs. You got to hit that king or that 9. Did on the river, and so get to stick around the triple up.
It looks like it paid off for Rob there, getting the winnings off that game right there. So back to Rob having an ace and a 3, and this is a good spot to be in if I'm not mistaken, right, Eric?
No, this is a pretty bad flop, actually, because what you're looking at with an ace-3 here is that you need a 10 to hit your gut shot straight, but you really don't have anything else. He's got no pair, so he's losing to any king, queen, or jack. He's behind any other ace in the deck because a 3 is a bad kicker. And so you really don't have a lot of playability. It's the type of hand that you should be folding against pretty much the smallest of bets.
Interesting. I guess I looked at it a different way, but it looks like there's...
Well, he's ended up hitting a pretty good board where the jack is now counterfeited, as we say. If someone had a jack in their hand, they'd be playing the kings and queens. And so actually ace high is then the winner in that spot. And any other pair that might have been in someone's hands, let's say they had a pocket 6s, again, the kings and queens play over the 6s, and so a pair like pocket 6s was just playing the board there, and the ace high is going to beat those hands.
Yeah, and it paid off for Rob. He got FaZe to fold, and now it's not looking too good for FaZe. He's only got 927 chips left, and surprisingly, Rob is out on top. The one who went out first is now the one on top because he was able to take advantage of that buyback before the half-hour mark. So he's got a queen and an 8. There's an 8 on the board, ace on the board as well, and then a 2. What's going through your mind here? What are you thinking when it comes to these next 2 cards?
Yeah, this is a pretty good spot in that he's betting the minimum to kind of see where you're at. If your opponent has an ace, there's a good chance they're going to raise, and they're for sure at least going to call. No one's ever going to fold an ace. But pretty much any other hand, you're just going to take it down right now with your 8. You've got the second pair. You've got a decent kicker with your queen, so it's a good spot to have that 8. And so I like his bet there, and he just took it down without taking any more risk, whereas let's say your opponent has a jack and a 10 in their hand, so doesn't do anything on that board, but if a jack or 10 comes out, they're beating your 8, so you kind of deny them that equity of being able to see more cards.
Yeah, and Rob's, coming away with this game here, significantly above any of the opponents on the board. We're going over to FaZe. He's got an ace of diamonds, a 5 of clubs. Not really much he can do here. Oh, and then he comes up with a pair, but still, you think he's in a bad spot with, I know he has a pair on the board, but is he still in a bad spot here?
At the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough spot if your opponent's playing the hand because the odds of them having the king or the queen are pretty high. So this late game strategy now with 4 players left with paying the top 3, when you're the short stack, you're basically in that push or fold mentality, in that you don't want people coming in with their marginal hands. You don't want to give them the opportunity to just check in the big blind and see a flop with their queen and their 4. You know, you with your ace 5, you want to go all in on the button, get them to fold their marginal hands, pick up those blinds, and that's free money that will really help you as the tournament goes on. And so now, you know, if you're in Rob's seat and you've got the most amount of chips, well, now you get to put pressure on all the other players because no one wants to get eliminated and get $0 when third place gets 200. And so this is kind of that spot where you can put pressure on everyone to be folding even their pretty good hands, just because you just don't have the equity to get it in there and mix it up when, you know, you're putting real money on the line at this point. With 4 people left paying 3, that now every pot is for real money.
Yeah, it makes sense. And now we're over to your buddy Tannen, who's got a jack and a king. There's a 10 on the board. Pretty good spot to be in, right? Yeah, I mean, we see with the flop here, there's a 2, but it's still the odds with his cards, being an amateur that I am, pretty good spot, right? Having 2 royal cards in his hand.
No, I mean, at this point, he's just playing king high. There's only one more card to come, so the odds of him ending up with a pair, you know, there's 3 kings and 3 jacks in the deck. You've got 4 cards on the board, 2 in your hand, so 46 cards, 6 out of 46 chance of even having a pair. That's, you know, sub 15%. So 85% of the time, you're going to have king high, which is just not a very good hand. And so not really much you can do in that spot. I agree with Tana's decision to just check. You know, there's someone already all in. You want them to go out so that you can now ladder up, as we call it, which is increase your pay from $0 now to a guaranteed 200. The worst he can do is third place, and so he did everything perfect there.
So at least everybody now on the board is going to get some sort of money here, which is a good place to be in, because at least you're getting, you know, some winnings. But it looks like Drama King Matt came out with the win on that last hand. And still over at Tannen with a king and a 9, some good cards, and if I'm not mistaken, they're both diamonds. So he's got a good hand to start here, and if I'm not mistaken, that's why he put in a little bit more money, you know, in the initial bet.
Right, not a hand that he wanted to go crazy with, which is why, you know, pre-flop he's in the small blind. The button just called, so it's on him. You know, 250 from one opponent, 250 from the other opponent. He's got 125 in, so he only had to call 125 to win 625. So he's getting 5-1. So pretty easy call with a king 9 suited. Then Rob just raised the minimum, so 250 more. There was another call. So again, for the second time in the hand, he was getting 5-1 on his call. So he called again. And the flop really didn't give him much. It gave him the gut shot where a jack would make a straight, but no diamonds out there. He doesn't have a pair. And so, you know, you hope to hit that straight, but when you don't, you can fold and kind of get away from it. Like this is the situation we talked about earlier, where these type of hands, you don't really have to lose big. And that's really what you want, is to, you know, be able to play big pots when you have strong holdings and be able to get away from it when, you know, you don't have a strong holding.
Yeah, and it looks like with the river here, he doesn't really have much. So in this situation, if I'm an amateur, and tell me if I'm wrong, I'm folding in this situation because didn't really have anything there besides the queens on the board.
Right. It's a spot where you can consider bluffing and hope that nobody else has anything. But you're right. Your hand really doesn't have any value. You know, king high has a small amount of showdown value in that sometimes players just have two-hand worse than that, but it's certainly not likely with two other people in the hand with four other cards on the board where, they just need anything to connect with any card on the board to make a better hand than your king high, or they could have a better king high, or they could have ace high. There's just so many things to beat you.
Yeah, so many options, and it looks like it didn't pay off for Tannen here, and now it looks like we're just down to 2. Tannen is going to come home with the 3rd place winnings, and now we got Drama King Matt versus Reforge, and Drama King Matt coming out with a lot more chips, but Rob taking home that pot there. 3 Jack, not a good hand, but at this point, would it even be? It would be pointless to fold in that situation because you're just going up against one person, right?
3 hearts.
Right. I mean, Rob just limped in the small blind, which means that Drama King Matt didn't even have to put in a single chip to see the flop. So very easy check. When it's one-on-one, heads up at the end, the whole game is different. Hand evaluations change dramatically, because you're only up against at a very maximum of one hand. Like you can't. The problem with a hand like the Queen 6 that I can keep bringing up is that when 5 other people are playing, the odds of them having hands that crush you are just too high. Now, a Queen 6 when it's heads up is very different. The odds of the one other person having a better queen in their hand is extremely low, and so that just kind of changes everything as the number of players goes down. And so this is, the spot where being the most aggressive and putting pressure on your opponent, because as we've seen with the vast majority of these hands, it's hard to hit anything. There's a ton of bluffing and heads up because you just don't make a pair very often. There's not that many cards that come out on a flop, so the odds of your 2 cards in your hand matching the 3 cards on the board is pretty low. And so if you're able to be aggressive and kind of put pressure on your opponent, you can steal a lot of pots in these spots against players who are just not very experienced.
Yeah, and there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot less cards, that are being played because all the opponents are out. So the chances of you getting those pairs and whatnot are very difficult to do. So, it's a very aggressive game here now, as you mentioned, with the 2 of them left. And Reforge has, we're on Reforge now with a Jack and an 8. There's a Jack on the board. Doesn't really have much besides a pair, but. Like you said,
like we just said, a pair is huge in heads up. Like this is a hand that you're not folding very often because you're only beat by 2 different diamonds or a queen, and the odds of your singular opponent having one of those combinations, it's just low. Like that's just not a very likely thing. Like if you dealt them 2 random cards from the deck, the odds of it being one of those sets of hands is just not very high.
Now we're still on Reforge here, and he's got a 4 and a 7. Like you said, the cards here are just not very good, but it's going to be. I feel like it's going to be a lot of back and forth here. And Reforge has the pair of aces, pair of 7s, but Drama King Matt could have a good hand here. We shall see here on the flop what's going to happen. If you're Reforge and you have that 4 and the 7, you're putting the pressure on, right?
Yeah, it's a good spot to bet. You have a pair, so there's a good chance you have the best hand. You also have that club in your hand, so any other club is going to give you a flush. Now it's going to be a bad flush because he's got the 4 of clubs, so you're beaten by pretty much every other club in the deck. Only the deuce and the 3 are lower, but it's not super likely that your opponent has one of those things. So you bet out, you try to get them to fold, and then you should have equity against a large range of hands that they might call with. And right now he's in a tough spot, though, because his hand didn't improve. The board texture didn't get any better. He's just got 4th pair. The flush didn't come in. You're not beating too much right now. And, well...
Now we're switching over to Drama King Matt, and kind of the same situation. I mean, he's got a pair of 9s and then, the ace high there, and he's coming out with the win. Not looking good for Reforge in this situation. Do you get more aggressive if you're Reforge?
No, I mean, you really can't. Like, here's the thing is that you only have to work with the chips that you have in front of you. And so the most aggressive thing he can do is go all in. Well, right now he has 4.5 blinds, which honestly, the range of hands that Drama King Matt should be calling a shove with when your opponent has 4.5 blinds is pretty wide. There's a lot of different hands that are worth calling to get those pot odds against. And so you can't actually be shoving super light. You need to have a decent hand so that when you get called, you know, have decent equity to win. You don't just want to lose. Right now, if I'm Drama King Matt, I'm looking to go all in. He's got a gut shot straight flush draw, which means a singular card, the 9 of diamonds, will give him a straight flush, but that also means any diamond gives him a flush, and any 9 gives him a straight. You also had the overcard with the jack, so a really strong hand. You're pretty happy to go all in there against pretty much anything your opponent can have. You should have a good amount of equity against the entire range of hands, and so a good bet there. And now he's got a nearly 9-1 lead.
So if you're Drama King here, you know, you're obviously in a good spot. But as we're going to go here to a break for 5 minutes, you know, Drama King, I feel like he should just call Rob out on this last hand here. He's got the equity, like you said, and if you're Rob and you see someone call that 1,040 chips, would you just immediately fold, or are you just taking the risk?
I don't know why I thought it all comes down to what cards you have, and so Rob's going to be wanting to get it all in with his 2 blinds with a huge range of hands. Drama King Matt's going to want to be calling that 1,000 chip with a huge range of hands, and so we're going to be seeing an all-in situation against pretty much anything but the very worst of cards. Now, if you have a 2 and a 3 offsuit, okay, that hand. It might be. It's still really close, honestly. That hand might be bad enough that you can fold. But yeah, that's kind of the situation we're at, where because there's so much in the middle to start with between the small one and big one, and there's so little left behind for Rob, that yeah, you are kind of in a situation where, you know, the cards just get all.
Like celebrities, wrestlers, you know, whatever, versus just regular.
So it looks like we're going to listen in here to Drama King for a little bit as we have the break.
And stuff like that. I
get his thoughts on what's going on.
So I don't know which one I am. I don't know if I don't know if I'm playing against pro poker players, or if I'm just playing against, you know, anybody else. Could be 2 lampposts, true, which I'm not that either, really. I guess that's not fair. I guess that is true. Andy, I see. So minimum is 300. Is the minimum 300 is the minimum bet now? Okay, that's a good point. I'm gonna ask the guy after this. After the fact, I will ask him who it was. If it's another wrestler, that'd be cool, right? And I can see whose ass I beat. No, again, you guys are giving me some good advice on some of these. I've got a couple of gut instincts, but you guys are giving me some great advice on this, actually. I got a couple of card sharps in here. Look at that. Use that to my advantage. I should just play online poker for real money with you guys.
It looks like Rob is a little tired here. He's not doing too hot. We got 2 minutes left in the break. An hour-long poker, it makes you tired, and you can see it on his face. He's worried a little bit, obviously, with someone that has almost 9 times the amount of chips that you have.
Yeah,
oh boy!
You get it all in. You get it all in again. You win twice, so you know you're about 25% to win. Let's call it 2 coin flips, and it's almost even. So yeah. You know that's how fast things swing.
I would have to say this is the if Rob is able to pull this out here and come back, this would be the biggest comeback of all time.
You guys found this.
Looks like we're gonna go back to Drama King Matt.
That's funny. That makes sense. Like there were a couple bold plays though, and they were racking up some chips there for a minute. That's interesting. That is fascinating. How do you find? Oh, I guess you could have looked up the same stream title I had, the Reforged Studios Poker Tournament. Oh. What? That confuses me though. Then, because he's like, yeah, please stream it because we're using that for like footage and stuff like that. And so I'm like, okay, I assume kind of maybe not everybody. Some of these might be just be like, again, like poker players who don't stream. But only 2 of us like actually streamed about it or tweeted about it or posted social media about it. All right, let's do this.
And it looks like we're back with Drama King Matt here.
All right.
And switching over to Reforge, who is all in on this round with an ace and a queen, a good hand to start off with. Like we said earlier, Eric, I mean, Drama King could call that and, potentially lose here. And Rob could be right back in this. But
yeah, he actually had pretty much the worst hand you could ever have. He was up against a good hand and actually made it's close. It's still extremely close, which is, kind of what we were saying, in that you can pretty much get it all in with any hand, but certainly nothing wrong with folding there. You don't want to give your opponent kind of closer to free chips with one of the worst hands you could have, and so just kind of get away from it for 400 and, try to win the next one. But he should definitely be trying to put some pressure on Rob's 3 big blind stack if he can.
Yeah, 100% agree with you there. I mean, with a king and a 2, not a very good hand. And if I'm in Rob's shoes, I'm folding here. But it looks like Drama King is going to place a bet here, and we'll see if Rob does anything. And no, he does not. So Drama King is going to go
on. A hand as good as King High is not really one you can get away from for that few chips. That is just, there aren't that many hands again in the deck that your opponent can have that are beating you. There's a good amount for sure, but King High actually is not so bad in that spot that when you have that few chips, I think I'm just getting my money in. But nothing wrong with folding.
Yeah, and it looks like Drama King, we're back to Drama King Matt here, who folded, and, Rob's not going to show. He's going to get back up to 1,480 chips. So this is a back-and-forth effort here of, somewhat comedic, if you ask me, just back and forth of folding and whatnot, because Rob's hanging on by a dear thread here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we haven't – I can't believe we haven't had an all-in and a call yet, and – hand number 4, where you should be probably getting it all in and calling with very close to 100% of the hands.
Don't even have to worry, man.
And you hear Rob in the background saying he doesn't have to worry, and he's going to pull out the win there because Drama King's going to fold. And now the new hand here, Rob is going to have he's just going to fold right away. This is very interesting back and forth effort of just folding and folding, and who can take away the pot the quickest. And Rob has an 8 of spades and a 2 of clubs, not a very good hand to go off of. And back over to Drama King Matt, who has a Queen of Hearts and a 5 of diamonds. Also not a good hand to go off of.
Right, it's a bad hand, but this is the spot again where your opponent has 3.5 big blinds, which is just the thing that matters the most is just how many blinds you have, which is how many times you can afford to basically fold before you're just completely out of the tournament. And when that number is extremely low, like it is for Rob right now, the range of hands that you kind of have to play, both as the person having that amount of chips, and then what we call an effective stack, which is to say that clearly Drama King Matt does not have 3.5 big blinds, which would be the 1,400 chips, 400 times 3.5. But that's what he's playing effective. The rest of his chips don't matter right now because the biggest pot he can play is for those 1,400 chips. And so his Queen 5 is then a hand that for those 3 blinds worth of chips, he should be getting it all in with. And so this is the type of hand where you can put pressure on your opponent and try to get them to fold. They're more marginal hands.
Yeah, and it looks like there's really nothing on the board here besides a pair of kings, and whoever has the highest card is most likely going to win this hand here. And my guess is going to be Drama King Matt for that. But
it's just going to be good here a huge percentage of the time.
Yeah, and it looks like he comes out with the win there. And Drama King Matt getting almost 9,000 chips. And Rob is, again, hanging on by a thread. 6 and a 7. Are those two in the middle to really start with? Or if we're in this late in the game, it's kind of okay to just to take those risks. What are you thinking?
I think he just wants to end
Right. Because he only has to call 600, the pot is 1480, so he's getting 2.5 to 1. 6-7 is certainly good enough to do that. He's in the worst spot possible up against the dominating.
No. Whoa, sorry to interrupt you there, my friend, but it looks like he had the straight. And Drama King Matt coming out with the victory in first place, and Rob Reforged Gonzalez coming out in second, and your buddy Tannen Grace coming in third place. It has been a pleasure learning from you, Eric. It is, hopefully one day we'll be able to meet in person and you can teach me your poker ways. We're going to go to a short break here. I am going to be leaving you today, and we're going to be cutting back to Rob Reforged Gonzalez. But it has been a pleasure, and we will see you next time.
Welcome back, everybody. It is the Pros versus Joes UGL Invitational. It's me, Reforge. I invited a bunch of my friends to play some poker on the Ignition Casino platform. So make sure that you go ahead and over to their site, check it out, make an account, and have some fun yourself. And you got to hear Chris and Eric talk a little bit about poker, and you got to see me lose at the very end after I had a huge stack against the table. But it wouldn't have been right if I won my own tournament, right? Like that would be a little bit sus, right? So
you have Rob win the home game. That's not fair.
Right, exactly. It's bad enough I got second, but it was just kind of funny because everybody at the table, like nobody knew who was who. So it was like I didn't know if it was Avery at the end or if it was Brock at the end or if it was Shane or anybody. So, you were just kind of trying to remember, this number bet this way, but you really couldn't you were only playing for you had like maybe 20 minutes of information, right? So it's not like you had a lot to work with here, but I'm sure everybody at home got a nice poker lesson, from the questions that Chris was asking as well as your answers. But like I said, maybe next time, we can do, we'll get some professional poker players in here and we'll see what we can do from there.
I'll gamble it up and see what happens.
Yeah, and I also want to make sure to thank all of our players, Shane Vereen, Brock Vereen. Thank you to Avery. Thank you to FaZe Clips, as well as Ambush King, Tannen Grace, who ended up getting third, getting some money. It's always nice to cash a little bit there. But overall, I had a good time. I almost got knocked out, got a River King to save myself because earlier in the tournament when I had a free rebuy, I was like, well, what's it gonna hurt? I'll put in that. I'll just take a chance, see what happens. And at the very worst, I can rebuy right away. So
people were really taking advantage of that. I thought that was a good strategy, especially it was a spot where I think it's a good spot to bluff. It's very unlikely for your opponents to have anything, so more than reasonable bluff spot, and of course got called in 2 spots.
Yeah.
So didn't exactly work out, but definitely surprised to see it.
Yeah, and it's just, everybody's kind of new to it, and it's one of those things where a lot of people, if it's our Pros and Joes, if it's some of the competitors in the UGL, and, make sure you check out the UGL. They've got their league where they do Call of Duty, Madden, FIFA, 2K, lots of professional players like Chad Ochocinco and Marshawn Lynch. Those guys are owners in that league, so make sure you check out their broadcast. But, everybody plays a little bit of poker at home, even when you're a little kid, so it's just kind of fun to play with some friends, have a little bit on the line, nothing too wild or crazy. And even though I didn't win, I was happy to see Mr. Drama King Matt win, and it's just seeing it from his perspective.
Win after the fact was fun.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and then he beat up the chair. I don't, my face might have been on the chair. I don't know, but whatever it is, I had a good time. But I wanted to say thank you to everybody at home for tuning in. Thank you to UGL. Thank you to Ignition Casino, and again, everybody at home, thank you for being here, and thank you, Eric, for coming by and give us some insight.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, well, like I said, everybody at home, hopefully we'll be able to do this again. So make sure you tune into the channels, check out UGL, check out Reforged Studios, which is my studio here, and maybe we'll have another poker tournament where we'll get different pros, different Joes, and maybe next time I'll win my own tournament and make it completely seem rigged. But until then, have a good night, and we'll see you next time.